The committee is now in public session. Thank you so much for coming in a bit early to accommodate our schedule. Next up, we will be hearing from Anton Begman, Chief Electoral Officer. You have 25 minutes for your presentation, followed by 30 minutes for questions from the committee. We do have a timer on the screen today to help us stay on schedule. So now I will turn it over to you if you'd like to introduce your staff and then begin your presentation. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Ms. Deputy Chair, and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity today to meet with you and present our supplementary funding request for the 2025-26 fiscal year. I'm joined at the meeting by my two Deputy Chief Electoral Officers here at the table with me. On my right is Charles Porter, Deputy Chief Electoral Officer, Electoral Finance and Operations. On my left is Kerry Pridmore, Deputy Chief Electoral Officer of Corporate Services. And Jody Cook, our Executive Director of Electoral Finance, Tanya Aiken-Close, Senior Director of Finance and Administration, and Andrew Watson, Senior Director of Communications, are also in attendance. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that our meeting is taking place on the traditional territories of the Lekwungen peoples, represented by the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. I acknowledge with gratitude and respect their stewardship of the lands that we are on. I'm always pleased to attend these meetings. It's an excellent opportunity to share with members of this committee and through you, the entire Legislative Assembly and citizens of British Columbia, the activities of my office and the way in which we use public funds to serve democracy in BC. This meeting provides us with an opportunity to put forward the budget requirements that are needed to achieve our mission in an efficient and fiscally responsible manner. As outlined in our annual report and service plan, our mission is to serve democracy in British Columbia through the delivery of modern, accessible, and trusted electoral services designed with British Columbians at the centre. Before speaking to the numbers that comprise our budget request, I'll make a few brief remarks on the work of Elections BC and our priorities for the upcoming year. After the intense effort in 2024-25 to deliver British Columbia's 43rd provincial election, our work in 25-26 will focus on election closeout activities and reporting. 2025-26 will also be a time to maintain our information technology infrastructure that allows us to administer elections, ensuring we can successfully deliver future events, and also to prepare in earnest to administer the campaign financing and advertising rules for the 2026 general local elections, which are just over 1 year away. As I reported to the committee earlier this month, we've also been focusing on cybersecurity measures to protect electoral integrity from new and emerging digital threats. This past year has been one of significant milestones for Elections BC. The 43rd provincial election transformed ways that elections are administered in our province. Following amendments to the Election Act in 2019 and 2023, it was the first general election that used technology in the voting process to better serve voters, to make the voting process more accessible, to report preliminary results faster on election night, to support campaign efforts to get out the vote, and to make voting and counting processes more efficient overall. We're currently preparing the first volume of the Chief Electoral Officer's report on the 2024 election, which will cover our administration of that event and which will be published this spring. Charles will provide more detail on the 2024 election and our preparations for future electoral events in his comments. Before addressing the 2025-26 budget requirements, I'd like to formally express my great appreciation to all British Columbians who supported the election, either by working as an election official, by standing for office, or by voting. Our elections depend on thousands of temporary staff from across the province, including many individuals from the districts committee members represent. This election would not have been successful without their tremendous dedication to our democracy. Our supplementary funding request has three elements. The first is a core services operating budget, which is the amount of funding required each year to administer our ongoing operations. The second element is our event budget, which is the one-time funding required to administer current and pending events, such as elections. And the third element is required funding to administer the political financing requirements of the Election Act. This is pass-through funding, with Elections BC receiving the funds and then distributing them to eligible political participants according to the legislated schedules. Our key requests for 2025-26 are summarized on page 2 of our budget submission. Our core services operating funding requirement is $965,000. This represents an increase of $492,000 or 3% compared to what was recommended by this committee in the fall of 2023. and $473,000 for 4 new FTE positions. Further details on the request for new FTEs are included in the business cases which form part of our submission. Carrie will provide more detail on our requirements for the core services budget in her remarks. Our event funding requirement for 25-26 is $5.099 million, comprising of 3 elements: $3.377 million for closeout activities related to the 2024 provincial election, $742,000 to prepare to administer the campaign finance requirements for the 2026 general local elections, $980,000 to replace the geographic information system that's used to administer provincial elections. This latter includes $575,000 for operations and $405,000 for capital. The requirement for public funding of political financing activities is $8.394 million, including $3.805 million for annual allowances for the political parties, $4.589 million for reimbursements of eligible election expenses. In accordance with our legislation, of course, Elections BC must pay an annual allowance to registered political parties based on turnout and support received in the most recent general election. To summarize then, our overall budget requirements for the 2025 fiscal year total $14.458 million. $965,000 for the ongoing core services budget, $5.099 million for the event budget, and $8.394 million for the public funding of political financing activities. Carrie and Charles will now provide more detail on the specifics of these requirements. Carrie?
Thank you, Anton, and good afternoon, committee members. It's my pleasure to appear today before the committee and to provide details about the numbers that you see in the budget proposal document. I will focus on our supplementary core services operating budget. As Anton mentioned, this budget includes an increase of $492,000 from which was recommended to this committee in the fall of 2023. This is required to fund the statutory wage increases for the officers of the Legislature, increased professional services for ongoing IT security assessments, legal services, and auditing services, and amortizations based on new capital requirements related to electoral events. The supplementary core services budget also includes a funding request for 4 critical FTE positions. This is required to fund 3 positions in investigations and 1 IT position. The investigations funding is required for 2 investigators and 1 senior investigator, and the IT funding is required for a senior security analyst. On the investigation side, we currently have an investigations team of only 2 FTEs, a Band 3 Director of Investigations and a Clerk 15 Investigations Program Coordinator. Historically, the investigations team has increased staff capacity with temporary staff for significant events, such as provincial and local government elections. However, the legislated and regulatory environment has changed in recent years, adding new responsibilities for Elections BC and requirements for significantly more oversight at both the provincial and local levels. These changes necessitate a different approach to investigation staffing, one that ensures a stable and professional team that is able to effectively manage the increasing demands of investigations. Apologies. Thanks. Okay. Our experience is that recruiting and retaining sufficient staff, qualified investigators is very difficult on a temporary contract basis. Having trained staff with both investigative and elections knowledge and experience is critical to ensure effective enforcement. Temporary staff are effectively always looking to find a permanent position. This is disruptive, caused by investigators leaving mid-contract is significant. Training and onboarding time is significant. There is often not sufficient time for it in the middle of a contract period if replacement positions need to be staffed. The loss of institutional knowledge and experience creates a risk related to effective case file management. We are therefore requesting these 3 new additional positions in addition to the existing director and coordinator. Moving to the information technology positions, as the legislative and regulatory environment has changed in recent years, so has the cybersecurity landscape. Elections BC is seeking to add a permanent senior security analyst to ensure that industry-leading cybersecurity measures can be enhanced and maintained between and during elections. Elections and electoral management bodies are recognized as high-profile targets for cyber threat actors, as modern elections employ extensive use of technology. In BC, we deploy tabulators, laptops, printers, and networking equipment to over 1,300 advanced and final voting places. This is in addition to opening 94 district electoral offices for the event period for approximately 3 months, all of which have their own network computers and printers. In addition, Elections BC continues to add public-facing applications to meet demands for efficient online services. These applications are targets for cybersecurity actors. The candidate nomination application system, which allows candidates to submit their nomination paperwork electronically, is an example of a critical application that must be protected. In 2024, Elections BC undertook a comprehensive review and enhancement of its IT infrastructure in response to cybersecurity incidents, including government networks, and in preparation for the 2024 provincial election. Adding a permanent role will ensure that the resulting IT security framework is maintained between elections, avoiding costly ramp-up activities leading into an event. The senior security analyst will be responsible for developing and maintaining the information security framework to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of Elections BC's information and technology assets. With more technology deployed and a new public-facing applications available, Election BC requires a dedicated security position to monitor and respond to cyber threats. Detailed business cases in these positions are included with our budget proposal. And with that, I will pass it to Charles for more detailed information on our budget requirements.
Thank you, Carrie. Good afternoon, committee members. As mentioned, I will focus on Elections BC's event budget request. Before getting into the funding request details, I would like to briefly outline where we are at in our business cycle and review the events of the 2024-25 fiscal year, including an update on closeout and reporting activities for the 2024 provincial election. Currently, Elections BC is in between major electoral events. We are completing administration of the 2024 provincial election and preparing to administer campaign finance rules for the 2026 general local elections. Our role in local elections is limited to administering campaign financing and advertising rules and does not include administering voting or candidate nominations. We are also preparing for the 44th provincial general election and readying for any number of on-demand electoral events. There are a number of important activities related to the 2024 election that have continued into this fiscal year. These activities include conducting and implementing lessons learned reviews, audits of election financing reports, consolidation and repackaging of returned election supplies, the production of the final election voters list with voter participation statistics, producing reports to the Legislature, and ongoing investigations. Elections BC received 565 campaign financing disclosure reports related to the 2024 election. The reports are reviewed for compliance with the Election Act. These reviews may result in audits or, if infractions are found, monetary penalties. This is to ensure that participants adhere to the rules in the Act. Typically, this work takes place for about a year after the filing deadline. As Anton mentioned, we are also preparing the first volume of the Chief Electoral Officer's report on the 2024 election. The report will highlight several significant administrative milestones we achieved this election. Better service for voters was one of them. On average, voters had a wait time of 2.5 minutes on final voting day. Voter surveys showed a 98% satisfaction rate with the service they received at the polls. Faster and more complete results reporting on election night. We reported preliminary results on election night faster than ever before by using electronic tabulators to count paper ballots. The polls closed at 8 p.m. on election night. By 8:30 p.m., 59% of preliminary results were reported, and 85% of results were reported by 9 p.m. By comparison, under manual counting processes used in the 2020 election, only 14% of preliminary results were reported by 9 p.m. And because of the new model, 97% of all ballots were counted and reported on election night, compared with about 90% in past elections. Over 2.1 million votes were cast in the 2024 provincial election, the most votes ever cast in a BC election. Turnout at advance voting was the highest ever, with over 1 million advance votes cast, and for the first time ever, more votes were cast at advance voting than on final voting day. We also received more than 111,000 requests for vote-by-mail packages, more than any previous election except for the 2020 election. This was our first provincial general election under new, complex, modernized election rules, procedures, and technology. As a result, the election provides us with an excellent learning opportunity. We've completed an extremely thorough review of data and election materials, conducted surveys, and held a comprehensive lessons learned process to learn from the event. We are at work optimizing all procedures and processes and addressing any issues consistent with our continuous improvement approach. Now I will turn to our event budget funding requests for 2025-26. The details of these funding requests can be seen on pages 2 to 4 of the budget proposal. Our event budget requirements for 2025-26 is $5.099 million. This is comprised of a number of components. $3.377 million is required for post-election work necessary to complete our administration of BC's 43rd provincial general election. Broadly speaking, funding for these closeout activities falls into the categories of salaries for temporary staff, information systems, and office expenses, which includes professional services. Event closeout activities include reviewing and auditing election financing reports, consolidating and repackaging returned election supplies, processing voter registrations and updates, producing the final voters list and participation statistics, as well as ongoing investigative and reporting work related to the event. $742,000 is required for preparations to administer the campaign financing rules for the 2026 general local elections. This includes costs to update forms, guides, and training materials for political participants, legal services, and staff training costs. $980,000 is required to replace the geographic information system known as India, which is used to administer provincial electoral events. This request will provide funding for a necessary technology project to replace the legacy geographic information system. This request is split between $575,000 operating and $405,000 capital funding. Our current system, the Integrated Digital Electoral Atlas known as India, performs election-critical functionality of geolocating addresses such that each voter can be accurately placed within a voting area and electoral district. It is required for the development of electoral boundaries, voting place locations, and other functions, as well as the production of related products such as electoral maps and communications materials. India was developed in the late 1990s, and at that time it was built as a custom solution because there were no viable products in the marketplace. India is now at the point where it is well past end of life, represents unacceptable risk, and must be replaced prior to the next provincial election. The current system architecture is past end of life and cannot be upgraded for continued use. While system components continue to function for the time being, they are at risk of failing or becoming unacceptable security risks. The supporting source code, database, and operating system are no longer industry standards, which results in costly external support due to extremely limited resources with the necessary skill set. Planning for this critical project has occurred over several years, and significant work progressed last fiscal year. We are nearing completion of an assessment for replacing the system with an industry-standard database and commercial software. This assessment has informed our capital budget request and includes an off-the-shelf software application, contractor costs associated with detailed technical design specifications, and the development of custom functionality which is necessitated by Elections BC's unique business requirements. Confirmation of the current estimates for 2026-27 operating and capital funding for this project will be provided as part of our annual budget submission in the fall. The current estimates for that fiscal year may be updated depending on progress this fiscal year. On completion of the GIS replacement, Elections BC anticipates that all ongoing system support in the future will be able to be accomplished using in-house staff. A detailed business case for this replacement project is included with our budget proposal. This concludes my remarks. Thank you. Back to you, Anton.
Thank you, Charles. Before opening up our presentation to comments and questions, I'd appreciate the opportunity just to make a few brief concluding remarks. Elections BC has a strong track record in relation to budget efficiency and fiscal responsibility. Throughout each year, on an ongoing basis, we continually assess and adjust our budget and actuals where we can find efficiencies. As an example of this, in 2024-2025, we're able to return close to $3.9 million, or 4% of our budget, to the province. Our proposal has been very carefully considered and includes only the funding that we believe is necessary to administer on our mandate. It includes relatively modest increases to the core services, operating, and capital budgets, as we have described. We appreciate that in the current fiscal environment, all agencies across government must do their part to find savings wherever possible. The funding request being brought forward today is vital to deliver on our mandate and to continue to provide high-quality services to voters. We believe that making these investments now will help to reduce costs into the future. We're also looking to reduce costs across the organization as much as possible, such as limiting travel and overtime. And as is protocol with this committee, should Elections BC be required to administer any future on-demand events, such as by-elections, or should our mandate be changed through new legislation, we will write to this committee once the budget impacts have been assessed and if any new funding requirements have been identified. In closing, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Chair, Ms. Deputy Chair, and committee members for this opportunity to present Elections BC's funding requirements, and we will be pleased at this point to respond to any questions that committee members may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Any questions from members? Okay, Deputy Chair.
Thank you for the presentation. So the investigators, it's two investigators and a senior investigator, I think, were the request for full-time employees. What type of investigations? So are they looking into complaints of potential elections fraud, that type of?
Yeah, so any complaints that we receive, we obviously assess those complaints to determine whether they are valid complaints and there is a possibility of a contravention of the Election Act. And of course of the Local Election Campaign Financing Act on the local side. They're the ones who would be carrying out those investigations on our behalf.
And so you indicated before that you have a group already of investigators. Is there an increase in the amount of investigations which is prompting the request for additional investigators?
That's a big driver. So as we noted in our comments, I believe that over the course of the last two events, we've seen an increase in requests for, or actual in case files that were investigation of over 223%, from 132 in 2020 to 427 in 2024. The vast majorities are related to our mandate in local government elections. There was new legislation that brought in requirements for registration of local elector organizations. There were new campaign finance requirements around what they need to have on their ads to make sure that the ads are transparent to the public. So there was a lot of people who were running at the local level who transgressed some of these, and so we needed to have a lot of additional capacity to order to investigate those completely.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, recognizing member from Coquitlam-Millarville.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your presentation. I was listening to you discuss stabilizing your team with bringing on permanent staffing members as opposed to responding to increased workload with temporary staffing solutions. This is good. All your reasoning is great, but I'm just wondering if you've experienced situations in which you would require a staffing surge. That implies to me that there's uneven workload throughout parts of the year. So what would your staffing, the permanent staffing, be doing for the remainder of the year?
That's a great question. I'll respond to that, and if Carrie and Charles have additional comments. So certainly there is a cyclical nature to our work. Where we are now, With general local elections and general provincial elections, they're scheduled for every second year. So obviously during those 2-year periods, there's a lot of work beforehand and then a lot of work afterwards in order to respond to complaints that we've received, to respond to any issues that we've been able to identify through our own QA processes and things like that. But what we've also put in place within the organization is a way to put in cross-training for people and being able to deploy resources to where they are most needed by the organization at any one point in time. So as an example of that, right now we have a large group of our team is working on the campaign finance reviews and feeding those into the audits of the disclosure reports that we received from all candidates in the election, as well as the annual financial reports from all registered political parties. So we're able to deploy resources from some parts of our organization that are at a lesser workload to those that are at a higher workload. With the cyclical basis of our events now being every 2 years, we're confident that the additional resources in investigations would enable us to retain or to recruit and retain people with a higher level of professional skills in this area as compared to how we're now staffing that with temporary workers. Charles, Gary, any additional comments?
The only thing I would add is that there are also, of course, numerous on-demand events that occur in between the two major events, so they can also drive workload for investigators.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I'll go to recognize a member from Surrey Panorama.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to say how Carrie's accent went from something to disappearing. That was amazing. I don't know what happened over 5 minutes, but anyway, the closeout at 3.377 million. How many temporary staff do you need for that, and what's the time frame? And any chance that can be? Is it if it's extended? Can you use less staff, or is it? I'll let you go from take
Charles
it from there.
has probably some specifics on that. I can say in general. This is one of the areas that we often find we're able to achieve efficiencies as we go through the work. Sometimes there is quite simply attrition. People who are working in these temporary roles will find a permanent position elsewhere and they will drop off. The nature of the work is that we're pretty good, I think, at planning based on the number of reports that we have and how we're able to review those reports. So typically, we know the volume of work that needs to happen. If there's fewer staff that are available to do that, sometimes that pushes the completion of that work out a bit longer than we originally planned. Charles, do you have the detail on the numbers?
Okay, at the moment, I apologize, we'll have to follow up unless you've got your, is it 41? 41, okay, thank you.
41 temporary staff for the closeout.
Okay. And how long do they? Is there? I don't know. If it's a contract. How long are they in place for?
The term for the different positions is different for each one. Some are going to August and some are going to December.
Okay. And then if I keep following it, yeah, they're going to let me keep following up.
Sorry, could you just repeat that, Anton, into the microphone because it's
Sure, some
captured
of the
into
staff, it depends on the nature of their individual positions and what they're being employed to do. Some of the staff will be retained until August, the end of August of this year. Other staff will conclude their term in December of this year.
Okay. For the overall budget, is there? We've discussed this, but the without you, but the I don't know, cyclical nature. The can we predict that for future budgets instead of going year by year? And so we're not asking for whichever bits and pieces of up to $5 million, so that because we know how much generally you're going to be paying back to the political parties and for reimbursements after elections. I'm just thinking for the future, and I don't know if everybody here will agree with that, but it would be nice if we could, even if we use the word placeholder for some money for, the per vote subsidies and everything else, if that could be put in place for a couple of years, and then, so it was a little more general.
Yeah, we could certainly look at changing the approach that we currently do and provide, planning estimates for some of those out years as opposed to doing it on a year-by-year basis for the event funding. I think the practice had been developed that way just because of the unpredictability of it. And, if there's a by-election all of a sudden, then we're going to need to access additional funding in order to administer that by-election. Some of the on-demand events, however, we administer within our ongoing core envelope. So typically recall petitions and initiative petitions, when those, we're able to administer the petition part of that within our current budget without requiring any additional funding for that. But should, say, an initiative petition then go to the verification stage, we may need to bring in additional temporary staff just to process the verification part of it. But it's something we could certainly look at, yes.
Very good, thank you. That's it for me.
Okay, Deputy Chair?
Yeah, thanks. About the cybersecurity threat, you'd mentioned that we have an increased vulnerability just to the nature of the amount of technology that we are now reliant upon. Are you able to expand a little bit? Have you been seeing an increase in threats, or is it an anticipation of the potential vulnerabilities that we might face? If you can just provide more detail about maybe the level of risk that we're facing, and some more detail on whether or not it's necessary for us at this time to bring in these additional resources.
Sure. So I do think that the risk is real, and I think the risk is ongoing. You may recall, of course, the cyber attack on the provincial government over the course of the summer of 2024. A lot of the services that we access and use are provided through agreements with the provincial government. And so that cyber attack that happened was certainly a direct risk to our systems. We were able to do a number of different audits to assess whether there was any penetration of our systems. And we're very happy that there were not, given where we were in relation to the election. But that is an ongoing and current risk. Other election agencies, Election Saskatchewan was hit with a ransomware attack in the lead up to their election. So there's not only foreign nation states. I do understand that the cyber attack on the province was a foreign nation state attack, but criminal organizations are also looking to make these types of things. I think protection of the voters list is incredibly important given the information that we have on it. We do have a number of protections in place. This position would enable us to have an expert on site rather than relying on someone on an on-call basis. I think it would enable us to be much more proactive in terms of deploying risk prevention activities and monitoring our systems on a real-time basis. I think that this is one area where we cannot afford to be less vigilant, even though it's not in the lead up to an election per se, because we maintain the list on an ongoing basis. And the types of threats, I don't know if you read the most recent report from the Communications Security Establishment and the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, but they certainly highlighted this as their number one threat that they're seeing. Carrie, if you have anything additional to say.
I agree with your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Recognizing member from Coquitlam-Millarville.
Thank you. I was hoping we could dig a little bit more into the replacement of the GIS system. And you've asked for $405,000 in capital and then some in funding in order to
Operating
implement.
funding,
Yeah.
yes.
And can you break that down a little bit for?
So in the business case, we highlight the specifics in terms of what we're anticipating to be spent on that project over 2 fiscal years. So the first being 25-26 and the second being 26-27. So in 25-26, there's $575,000 for operating expenses and $405,000 for capital. The capital is typically related to the actual development of customization to the off-the-shelf software that we will be looking at procuring. The industry standard for this type of project is Esri software, which is used across government, across a number of industries, but in order to enable it to do the unique things that we require it to do as an election management body, so to be able to geolocate or geocode where voters are so we can place them in the right electoral district, to be able to handle the map base underneath it, layering on electoral district boundaries and voting area boundaries, be able to produce files that can be used for maps and those sorts of things. There needs to be some customization of the off-the-shelf software that we will be purchasing. So that's what the capital part of that is for. The operating expenses are for the work kind of around that necessary to make those systems work. I don't know if you have more detail on the operating side of things, Charles?
That would include professional staff as well as in-house staff doing that work that relates to the customization, so that it can interact appropriately with all of the provincial systems that our systems have to interact with.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, are you looking for something more specific than what we had in the business case?
I think when I was looking through the business case, you divided the optimization of the software into capital and also into the operating. And so that was interesting to me, what is happening there, that part of the optimization is capital and part of it is operational.
Okay.
But your explanation that the part that's in operation is optimizing it to be compatible with current software within departments?
And our business needs as well. But also the GOBC's provincial cadastre system and other systems that we need in order to be able to do the work.
Yeah. All right. So is my understanding correct then? So then the part that's capital is pre-operational, and the part that is operational is going to be post-implementation.
I think there's a combination. I
continuous.
think the capital is mainly when you're actually coding software, where you're
Yeah.
developing new, we might need to write an interface piece that allows something. So the business process review around that would be operating, where we would have people understand the business connectors. The technical part where you're actually writing software code, that's the capital part.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Maybe I could add that we're also following government principles around what can be allocated to capital and operating. There's a specific formula for that we're required to follow, and that's how it's been divvied up.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? No. I have a question. We just heard that sometimes when there is a by-election, seems like there potentially is a variance in cost involved in holding by-elections. Just wondering if that's true, and if it is, could you give us a little more detail as to what contributes to that variation in cost?
Sure. So obviously, electoral districts have differing numbers of registered voters in them. And so a big driver of part of the cost is the cost to send where-to-vote cards to those voters and to staff an appropriate number of voting places to serve those voters. So in a larger electoral district with more voters, that would typically be a higher cost component than in a smaller electoral district with smaller voters. But then there's also other factors that vary widely from where you are. The cost of real estate is a big one. In downtown Vancouver, securing real estate for a district office, securing real estate for voting places can be quite expensive for those, where it can be less expensive in other areas. Similarly, in some some northern BC, it's also quite expensive to procure office space, because of competition for scarce resources with oil and gas or other industries and things like that. So typically, the variation is depending upon the number of voters, where the location is, and the cost of real estate that we need. And then there's also costs for advertising that vary in some cases. If you're needing to advertise in province-wide newspapers, there's a higher cost to that than if you're able to do the necessary legislated advertising in lower cost.
Thank you very much for that. If there is no further questions, we will end it here. Thank you so much for your time and presenting to us. We will take a quick 5-minute
Thank you.
recess and we will go into our discussions. Thank you. We're here, so let's just power through. I will ask for a motion to move to in camera. Any? Okay, thank you. Opposed? No. Okay, we're in camera. in public session also needs a motion to adjourn. Thank you. Opposed? Motion carried. The committee now stands adjourned. Good job, everyone. Oh my God.